Welcome to Talk Art. I'm Sally Rain, and I will be your host as we delve into the world of the artist and the art that's all around us. Talk Art is sponsored by the Silicon Valley Open Studios. During the first 3 weekends in May, hundreds of local artists open their studio to the public. The Silicon Valley Open Studios is a wonderful organization that helps artists promote their work and also create a wonderful network of local artists. Our guest, Joli Bogdan, is a textile designer and jewelry maker who also has a master's degree in art history. Her interests in color and texture and design infuse her weavings and her very intricate wire-wrapped jewelry. She currently works in her studio in Menlo Park. So, welcome, Joli.
Thank you for having me, Sally. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So your weavings that you have in this room are absolutely gorgeous. The colors and the textures. Tell us a little bit about how you learned how to do it and what some of your techniques for weaving are.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I studied textile design at college, and a lot of my pieces are hand-dyed, and I'm really, really drawn to complicated, intricate patterns. And that's sort of what led me into the jewelry, and that's what I try to follow through with that same intricacy and complex design.
So first you studied textiles, and you dye your own yarn as well?
All of these pieces behind you are hand-dyed, and the big purple one in the middle behind me.
Beautiful. Well, excellent. So you then made a transition into jewelry. Tell us a little bit about that. What drew you to jewelry as opposed to the textiles?
Well, yeah, so I think they really complement each other. I think what I really like is working with thin threads. And when I started jewelry, it was really the wire wrapping that pulled me into it, because I started working with really thin, it's just like working with stiff thread, really.
Yeah?
The thin wire.
But with different tools.
Different tools. A little harder, a little more fragile, but yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like embroidery, I'd say. I'd say my jewelry is a little bit like embroidery.
Well, that makes sense with the wire wrapping.
Yeah.
So what inspires you? When you're creating a piece of jewelry or you're thinking about a design, what inspires you to create a particular piece?
Well, I think, not to sound like a cliche, but I am inspired by nature a lot. And particularly with jewelry, what I try to do is work with specific stones that catch my attention. And then I try to make the metal complement the piece of stone. And I love the particular types of stones that I use. Like I use a lot of turquoise, for example. They're kind of like little miniature landscapes in themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about the stones that you use.
Right. So actually, this is kind of the segue into how I got into jewelry to begin with. I love being outdoors. I love camping. My family and I would go on a lot of camping trips, and one of the things that I really like are going to geologically unique sites.
Oh, well, you brought some pictures of some of your weavings and how you transitioned to jewelry, so let's take a look at those now.
Okay. So that is an example of a pattern that's it's a great example of one of the things that I'm really drawn to, with the kind of complexity that I think is followed through with the jewelry, where you have a really intricate pattern that's kind of large scale, and you can't tell immediately how large the repeat is.
Right.
And it just seems to go on, and it's a little bit lacy, but also geometric. So that's the same.
Wow.
Yeah.
Must be very difficult to keep track of all of that patterning.
It is, yeah. It involves a lot of counting, yeah, versus jewelry, which is much more instant gratification. Yeah, so those are very complicated patterns that I'm following on those images. And then that's an example of a bunch of turquoise pieces that are wrapped with 14-karat gold-filled wire. Some of them have some gemstones on them.
So all of the weaving and intricate design you do is part of the backing, isn't it?
That's right, yeah, exactly. And I have a little bit of the lace coming up, wrapping around the stone and holding it in place. And then all of the backs of those pieces have the intricate lace work, which is kind of like a little secret for the woman who wears it. You know,
Or if it turns over, it's still beautiful.
Exactly.
Which isn't always the case.
Not always the case. And that's a picture of Dean Otenson, who owns the Royston mine in Tonopah, Nevada, in central Nevada. And he's where I've been getting some turquoise from recently.
Do you actually go to the mine?
Yeah, that's a picture of him in the basement of the Hotel Mitzpah, which used to be the original mine entrance. I think it was also a gold mine. And now the turquoise mine is just behind the hotel. And he actually runs tours from there where you can go and you can you can go to the turquoise mine entrance and you can buy the rough. And I brought some of the rough with me today, the rough turquoise, as it grows in its natural state.
Excellent. Well, let's take a look at how you create your beautiful pieces. So you're going to do a demonstration for us.
I will, yeah. So I brought a couple of examples of turquoise pieces, and I brought all the tools that I need to make it. So it's actually, it's a lot of work, but it's not a lot of tools, if that makes sense.
Right. So are these all from the same mine?
No, so these two are from the Royston mine, which you just saw the picture of. And these, so this is what natural turquoise looks like in its raw state, and you can see it grows in like a sliver in the rock. And then these slivers are sliced and polished, and depending on how strong the vein is, it can stay in its natural state, which Royston is known for, the Royston turquoise. This is the rock, and it doesn't have any backing because it's really strong and stable. These are from the Blue Diamond mine, which is also in central Nevada. And I really like these because of the color and the black matrix that shows through them. And these have a backing on them. And that's just to stabilize the stone.
What kind of backing is it?
That's a trade secret, actually, so I don't know.
You don't know? Oh, so the mine owners have their own way of doing it?
It's a practice. Yeah, the turquoise business is, it's a very involved sort of process. Yeah.
Excellent. So show us how you create your pieces.
So I start with a piece with a stone, and then I take just plain, this is 14 karat gold filled wire, and I just take, this started off as one just long piece of wire, but I mold it to fit around the stone. So you just sort of bend it, and you use your pliers till you get it into the shape there. It's hugging the rock. And then I've already bent one end beforehand, but now I'm going to bend the other one for you. So these little loops are what the chain is going to go through. So then you just try to make them as symmetrical as you can.
So what tool are you using?
So I'm using round nose pliers right now, and I'm just using it to make this little circle that matches the circle on the other side. And then I'm going to bend this a bit and hammer it. The hammering does two things. It stabilizes the form, and it hardens it.
So that hardens the gold.
It hardens it, yes. So it keeps its shape. So before I hammered it, I was able to move it really freely and get it into whatever shape I needed it to go. And now that I've hammered it, it's kind of stiff, and it'll keep its shape now. So you can see that it's going to look kind of like that when it's finished. So this is step one. And then you take a much thinner gauge. This is still 14 karat gold fill wire.
Do you always use gold?
I actually use three types of metals. I use gold, sterling silver, or copper.
Oh.
And
Is there any difference besides price of them?
So the price is very, very different. And yes, there's a lot of difference. So I also brought some examples. These are some pieces of sterling silver. So the color is different.
Well.
And and then this is copper, right? I have some little shapes here. I'm wearing a Tree of Life necklace, and this is how the Tree of Life necklace starts, is right here.
And the necklace that I'm wearing is copper, right?
That's copper. That's
beautiful.
Exactly right. Yeah. So copper and gold are soft. Gold is softer than copper. The silver is soft too, but it's much more, it's not as soft as, I'd say the gold, copper, and silver are the degrees of softness. And that means that gold is easiest to work with. It's the most like thread. And silver, especially with this little lace thing that you can see that I made here, it's actually really, really stiff and fragile when you're working with it at that level of complexity.
Wow.
So I prefer to work with gold because it's the softest. Yeah, but it's also the most expensive. So I'm going to put these back here, and then I'm going to show you how I get started.
Okay. So now you're going to be doing the lace work.
Right. So now I'm going to do, so each of the turquoise pieces that I have this intricate lace. I'm going to show you a more, that's the more advanced state of the lace. And I'm going to show you how I get there. And I like to work off the spool because it conserves on the material. And then I just kind of start wrapping at one end.
So it's a lot of very precise hand movements for this. Well, I would imagine that
exactly
weaving
right.
is also very similar to that, very precise.
Absolutely.
So
I think you can really see the textile influence in how I do the wire wrapping.
So what made you decide to do such intricate lace work with wires?
Well, with the turquoise, I've always loved turquoise jewelry, and but I'm less fond of the big clunky way that it's usually, there's this particular style of turquoise jewelry that I think is a little bit dated, and I like to see, I kind of like the incongruity of using using metal and making it look like lace. I like in sort of antique tapestries where they were using gold thread and things like this. So I was kind of challenged by the material to see if I could take something that has such a specific tradition like turquoise jewelry, and if I could reinvent it a little bit.
Right. When I think of turquoise jewelry, I think of the big silver belt buckle kinds of inlaid silver. So yeah, it's quite beautiful.
Thank you.
So you're going around the backing.
So now I'm doing, now I'm
just
doing
the edge first to start
now
with.
just the edge. This is what in traditional jewelry making is called a bezel, but I'm not making it the way bezels are normally made because I'm basically going to make the whole thing out of lace. But it performs the same purpose, which is that it frames and kind of catches the stone so that it keeps the stone in place.
So once you've gone all the way around, what happens next?
Right. So then we move to the other piece. This is one where I've gone all the way around the entire edge. I don't know if you can see that, but I've gone around the edge here.
Is there a particular pattern that you're using?
Yes. So I have two sets of loops sticking up on the bottom and the top. The bottom is going to form the backing, which is what you see here when it's complete. And then there's going to be one that comes up from the side that curves over the stone and actually catches it from the top and the bottom.
So what you were doing was making two loops as you were going around. You weren't just wrapping it like, like the jewelry that I have is just wrapped around, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, but this is a different pattern.
And yours, the one that you're wearing, those are beads and they have holes in them. So you can have the bead, you're kind of sewing the bead onto the frame, the wire frame. Whereas here, you're making a net to catch the stone, right? So now I'm making the net. So now I'm making the back of the net. It's, I know it's hard to see this level of detail when you're far away, but it's, you can see from my hands, I think, that this is very much like sewing, I'd say, more than anything else.
That's so interesting that you really
Yeah.
are using weaving in jewelry. That's amazing.
I really think that it's the closest analogy I could come up with. For me, it seems like such a natural transition between the two. It doesn't.
Right.
There's no, there's no contest between them. It's the same set of skills.
It sort of reminds me, the backing looks sort of like dream catchers almost.
Yeah.
That kind of weaving.
Yes, that's right. And it's also the structure of knitting. This is what knitted, t-shirts, sweaters look like. It's the same kind of single loop going in around itself, which is different from weaving, because weaving is many, many threads coming together to make a grid. So this isn't a grid. This is more
one at a time.
Structurally speaking, yeah, one at a time, exactly. One thread rather than.
So about how long would it take for you to complete the backing that you're working on now?
About an hour for this part.
Oh, that's not too long.
It's not that bad, but then if you incorporate beads, or if you're doing, the gemstone beads, because of course if I'm using precious metals, then I'm also using precious beads. It can take up to 4 hours, I'd say, for one piece.
You can also talk while you're doing it, which is amazing. That's one thing I can't do, is paint and talk at the same time. So
yes, that's
sort of
right.
like bringing in the quilting bee. You could have people doing it together, creating
You could.
jewelry.
Yes,
very nice.
you could. Yeah, yeah. So then it just goes on like this. And
do you have different patterns for the back of them that you work on, or are they all pretty much the same? They all like this one.
That's the basic structure. So what I sometimes do is I incorporate a row of gemstones in between them. So I'd have 2 strands of the stiffer, thicker wire, and then I would lace a row of gemstones in the middle, so it creates a thicker edge.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. And then with some of the pieces that are behind me, I link several of them together like this. And you can also use the little edges that are there to sew it together. And then, of course, this isn't the only design. This is the design I use for cabochons, this is a cabochon. It doesn't have a hole drilled in it. It's a solid piece of rock. But the piece I'm wearing, the Tree of Life pendant, you're actually sculpting a tree out of wire inside a frame.
Right.
So there's basically a limitless amount of things that you can do.
Well, yeah. That's what art is.
That is what art is,
It's
exactly.
True. Well, it's wonderful that you can be so creative with it.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it. It's such a pleasure for me to work on these.
So after you're done with your weaving of the middle, you end up with something that looks like that.
Right.
And then what happens?
So then this is the exciting part. This is when you put in the stone and you catch it. So I have a piece of stone. Which one was it? This one. This piece of turquoise. So this is the one I molded it to begin with.
Right.
And then now, where did I start? Now you start going around and you hold the stone in place and you start making the wire, building it up along the side. So you're using that second set of hoops.
So it'll end up looking like that?
Exactly, except in this one, well, you asked earlier if I use a different technique. On this one, I didn't use a thicker piece of wire. I did a separate kind of mesh bezel edging, and then I wove that out from the back and the front. So actually this technique, the one I'm using now, is slightly evolved from that one.
So that will end up holding the turquoise in?
Yeah, I'm going to do 2 rows of knitting up on top of the stone. So it's going to create like a catch.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, you brought some pictures of some of the pieces that you finished already.
Yes.
So why don't we take a look at those?
And not all of them are turquoise.
Well, let's take a look at the variety of work that you do.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so there I'm illustrating the process that I'm doing right now. So there you see some malachite stones, and there's 2 that already have a little gold frame that's been hammered to their shape. And I just like those little flourishes on top. I think that adds a nice edge. And we're going to get to see the process. So first I take the stones and I lay them out in a way that I like. And then I start making the gold frames. And I pound them flat. And then, oh, there you go. There's a shot of the lace in the back. So that's the process that I've just been demonstrating. That's how you got to that part.
So you work from the outside in with your loops?
Exactly. Nice. Yeah, you build on that initial central frame. And there I've already done the top where I've caught the pieces of malachite. And I've laced 2 of the edges together. And then you can see the third one, the little one off to the side with the partially finished frame behind it. And then there's the finished piece. And then I go, after I link all the 3 pieces together, I go over the outside of the whole thing with 1 set of loops. And then I didn't bring any close-ups of the 2 cords coming off the side, but the cords themselves are woven in the same way and then attached to the edges. And then there's just a piece of turquoise with the gold lace. And then this one is a different way of wrapping, again, and that's using sterling silver that's been oxidized in a hot spring.
In the hot spring?
Yeah, the sulfur in the hot spring turns the silver that darkish gray color.
Right.
Yeah, which is a really nice process. That's a picture of Austin, Nevada, central Nevada, in the middle of absolutely nowhere, where I found the blue diamond mine. That's where my turquoise journey began. And those are the pictures of the hot springs outside of Austin, where I take to oxidize the silver.
So which came first, going to the hot springs or finding the turquoise?
The hot spring came first.
Oh,
the
really?
turquoise was an accident. It was serendipity.
That's great.
And then those are pictures of earrings like the ones I have on. Those are gemstones, a variety of different gemstones wrapped around the same kind of gold frame. Very similar process to how I started off with the turquoise being framed. There I start with the frame of the shape of the spiral, and then I embroider or whatever, wrap the gemstones around the frames.
So do those little gemstones that you have there, do they have holes in them?
Yeah, they do.
Oh, so
they're
you
rondelle beads. Yeah, they're faceted rondelles.
So what kind of stones do you use?
So on those the central stones on those are labradorite, which is one of my favorite stones. And then next to that is garnet, peach moonstone, maybe a ruby, and then 3 pink tourmalines, it looks like. Yeah.
So you have all different kinds. Those are beautiful.
I do, yeah. I love working with gemstones, yeah. And then those are little miniature versions of the paisleys that we just had, the bigger ones. And those are different shades of tourmaline.
So what is that?
That's 5 sets of tiny little earrings.
Oh, earrings.
Oh, they're
beautiful.
little drop, kind of half hoop, half drop earrings. And then I get creative with the layout.
Oh, that's the tree that you were talking about.
Yeah, that's the Tree of Life pendant. And I'm wearing actually that exact one today, except now it's been oxidized, so the one I have on looks black, and that was before I oxidized it when it was so bright.
So how do you weave the tree? Do you have a pattern that you've already laid out, or do you do it sort of freehand? How does that work?
I do the frame first, and then I know I have 8 sets of branches on each side. And then I work in from the branches, and then I just twist further and further down until I come to the central trunk, and then I do the roots last. There it is, the same thing in copper with crystal beads rather than gemstones. And then there is the piece that you're wearing tonight.
And what kind of stones are they?
The central stone on that is labradorite, and then the rest of them are crystals.
That's beautiful.
With copper. Thank you.
You talk about going to the mines. Do you ever do any rock hunting? Are you interested in that, or where do you?
I would love to do more rock hunting. The turquoise is just kind of preparing me to get more and more involved in this. And the last trip that I took, I found out that there's an opal area in northern northern Nevada, sort of the southern tip of Oregon, and there's this wilderness where you can go and find opal just out.
Well, that would be beautiful because your lace wire lets the light through, and that would be absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
I'm ready to see those. I love opal.
Me too. Yeah.
So any other places that you might go, or things that you might
Well, there's also
use?
There's a tourmaline area in somewhere down in San Diego. This is a really, the part of the country we're in is really rich in geography,
right,
natural resources. There's lots of gemstones.
So are there maps that you can use to find these, or
it's kind of like treasure hunting?
Treasure hunting?
Yeah, it's not, there's no guidebook. You know, you kind of have to.
People don't want you to know. You have to find it for yourself. Because I know I love going to stores where there are rocks everywhere.
Exactly, yeah, yeah.
So do you get some of your stones that you use from stores and things in the area?
Most of the, in the area, that's a good question. I mean, the turquoise is the closest to the area where yeah.
So Nevada.
Nevada, exactly. And then, of course, New Mexico.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what are your future plans? Do you have plans to show in the area or out of your studio, perhaps?
So my studio is also a working shop, so people can come and see me. So unless I'm out on a rock hunting expedition, I can usually be found in the studio in Menlo Park at the Allied Arts Guild.
Oh, at the Allied Arts Guild, yeah.
But I also show at trade shows and art shows. So I sort of do a bit of traveling throughout the year. I'm kind of on a calendar, and then my work is in a few galleries throughout the country.
So can you very briefly tell us a little bit about Allied Arts? A couple of sentences?
Allied Arts is, well, for some, the best kept secret on the peninsula, I think. It's this amazing little sort of Spanish colonial revival historic building that was converted to artist studios, I think as early as the 1920s, because the oldest business in there, the Barn Wood Shop, has a big sign on the side that says since 1928.
Wow.
So I actually think that was one of the very first.
So you have one of the studios in
I am in the sheep shed.
Sheep
I
shed.
am in what it was the sheep shed. That's right. Yeah, because it was a working farm. And it's a wonderful, beautiful preserved gardens.
Well, thank you so much for showing us your art and how you do your designs. Thank you very much for being on Talk Art.
Thank you so much for having me.